Pokey fucks. I've seen that some people on the internet are convinced that Sun and Moon is actually a good game, which is bullshit. Here are the reasons why Sun and Moon fucking sucks. I have a checklist here. I have a checklist of like all the fucking reasons why it sucks. You ready for this? You ready? Number 1. There's no goddamn mysteries. Okay, so let's just go over the things that we know so far before we even get the fucking game, before the game was even released. Alright? 1. The starters. We know exactly what the starters are. We know what all of their evolutions are. I never want to know the final evolution of the starters before playing the fucking game. That's part of the excitement, is what the fuck is Poplio going to turn into? What are they going to do with this design in the end? I don't want to know about fucking Torracat or any of the other starters' evolution. I don't want to know that shit until I play the fucking game, alright? So we know about when you get the starters, who you get the starters from, how they evolve. It's like, I don't want to know none of that. Not fucking any of it. Number 2, the Pokemon. We know all the goddamn Pokemon. All of them before we even start playing the game. Every single Pokemon in the Pokedex and all of their evolutions. We even have a rough concept of how all of the Pokemon evolve. God damn it. That's too much. That's too much information. Never in a Pokemon game before, in any Pokemon game ever, have all of the Pokemon been revealed before the Pokemon game even comes the fuck out. It's ridiculous, okay? That's part of the reason why I'm so down on the Pokedex this time, is because there's no fucking surprises and nothing has a third evolution. Although we'll get to that later. Another issue is gyms have been replaced. Okay, I'm cool with gyms having been replaced by something, if that thing was neat. You know what I mean? But not only do we know that the gyms were replaced, but we know what they were replaced with, who leads each one. Well, then what the fuck is the surprise? We even roughly know in the fucking advertisements what order we have to visit the islands in. That's bullshit. Also, all of the surprises are ruined. The Ether Foundation is secretly evil. Red and Blue are in the game. Kukui is the champion. These are all surprises that are ruined for you by leaks and trailers. They did a very bad job of controlling leaks. And I know this just sounds like an infinite parade of like bitching about the fact that we know everything, but that's the point, is that you can infinitely bitch about the fact that we know everything, because this game is kind of destroyed based off of the things that we know. And maybe you're not the kind of person for whom spoilers do much, but see, I didn't watch a lot of videos about leaked material in Pokemon. I try to stay away from that kind of thing. I only watched the official trailers. And in the official trailers, every fucking secret was ruined for me anyways. That's very, very bad marketing, because there's a percentage of people who really do care about mystery in their Pokemon games. The first generation, you had no clue what the fucking 152 creatures were, what they evolved into. You had no idea. Same thing in Black and White to some extent. Really didn't know what you were getting. That's part of the surprise of a Pokemon game. You get 100 or so new, completely different creatures that do different things that you've never seen before and evolve differently. This game doesn't even fucking have that. A core feature of the Pokemon franchise is gone in this piece of shit. That's my first point. Alright, so major point number 2 on the list, the Pokemon. Since we know every single Pokemon in the Pokedex before playing the game, and all the Ultra Beasts, really, we don't have to worry about playing the game to take a review of how the Pokemon look and feel. The first thing is that there's not enough new Pokemon for a generation. This was a point that people made about X and Y. It didn't seem like it was as big of a deal, because there was Mega Evolutions, which kind of bolstered the roster of new Pokemon, and there was like 40 of those, so that was a pretty big amount of Mega Evolutions to take the place of normal Pokemon that we'd be getting. People were so excited about that, and the new designs that were there, the 76 or 86 designs that were in X and Y, were so good, were so fucking good, that we weren't even worried that there were fewer Pokemon that time around. You know, we weren't even concerned about that fact. But in this game, it takes front and center that there's not a lot of Pokemon, because there's not anything to fucking distract you from the fact that there aren't a lot of Pokemon. Alolan evolutions are underutilized for this very reason. See, when I saw Alolan forms, I thought, oh, okay, there's not going to be as many Pokemon this time around, but the Pokemon that aren't there will be replaced by Alolan forms. But there's only 25 fucking Alolan forms. There could have been 100 Alolan forms and 50 new Pokemon, okay, which could have allowed them to focus in on each design that they had to make it perfect. Instead, we've got 80 or so crappily designed Pokemon that they didn't take time on, and 20 really awesome fucking Alolan forms. It's so backwards. There should have been 100 Alolan forms. All you have to do to make an Alolan form is slightly tweak an already pre-existing Pokemon's design and change its fucking colors around. It's not so far different from making a shiny, really. You just have to update update the Pokemon a little. They could have done that 100 fucking times. They could have given Pokemon that need a little love from each generation a little bit of love, while also making it so they didn't have to make as many new Pokemon. It gets harder and harder to make new Pokemon because they've ran out of ideas. Like, Crabballer is basically Krabby. There's no reason why Crabballer couldn't have been an Alolan form of Krabby, I shit you not. And this is my whole point. The Alolan form really should have replaced the idea of having 100 completely new creatures. At this point, nobody can expect that. People can expect maybe 25 to 50 completely new, well-made designs each Pokemon game now, which is fine by me. Really, I wouldn't care if it was 10 good new designs. But the issue is they felt pressured to make 80 or so. They didn't know if this Alolan form thing was going to work out, so they played it fucking safe. They played regional forms safe, and they also played the design safe. It's a huge issue. This leads to a weird paradigm shift, where there is at once too many and too few Pokemon. We, for whatever reason, expect 150 new Pokemon per generation, but we don't have 150 new Pokemon in this generation. We don't have 150 Pokemon at all. That's part of the issue. Another thing is we have too many crap designs and too few good designs. So whereas we expect 150 pretty fucking awesome Pokemon, what we managed to get is 80 or so shit ones and a few Alolan forms. So it's weird, it's paradoxical to me that there can be too many and too few Pokemon designs. This leads me to my next point here, is that there's no third fucking evolutions. Okay, I feel like the reason why there's no third evolutions anymore is because third evolutions are hard to make. You see, Pokemon have always tried to balance out looking cute, cool, and powerful. But as Pokemon has tried to move more and more towards looking cute, making powerful and cool designs has become harder and harder. Cute is usually the opposite of cool and powerful in the collective consciousness. It doesn't have to be that way, but it usually is. And so, because making a Pokemon look fearsome, making it look like a monster, will detract from the inherent cuteness factor, you know, they don't do that as often. Here's the thing. Babies are cute. Baby bear, cute. Adult bear, fucking fearsome. And that's how Pokemon designs are too. Baby, teenager, fucking monster. That's how it's supposed to go. You get that awkward phase in the middle where it's kind of a monster and kind of cute, and then you get the monstrous form at the end. But that's not the case anymore, because they're too afraid of alienating their audience by making fearsome looking Pokemon designs. The Pokemon world's supposed to be so friendly now that even the idea of fearsome looking Pokemon has been abandoned. Fucking Blastoise and Charizard would never exist now because they're not as cute as their original designs. What happened to fucking dinosaurs? What happened to playing a game where you literally catch elemental versions of a fucking dinosaur? I'm serious. Generation X and Y understood this. That's why Pokemon got bigger and stronger as the game went on. The fact that there's no third evolutions bearing that one weird Pokemon with the long legs that's oddly sexual and a plant. The only one that has 3 evolutions that's new is that one, which is weird to me. You know, but then you have Pikachu, whose design doesn't even change in its Alolan form or in its Pichu form, and yet Alolan Raichu looks completely different. That's the third evolution. It's weird. It's really fucking weird. And they don't add any third evolutions. For instance, why not give another evolution to Persian or Meowth? That line could use a third evolution. They're a little underpowered now. Marowak could have used a new evolution, but they have added no new evolutions. The new Pokemon don't have third evolutions either, which means that these Pokemon seem all around weaker and less fearsome and more safe and passive than previous generations of Pokemon. I play Pokemon because I want to go on that journey with my Pokemon. From them being small, baby, cute things, to them being big, fearsome monsters. That's what I want from my Pokemon designs. That's how it's always been. That's how it should be. I see no reason to neuter the way Pokemon look. And that's the problem here. Pokemon franchise feels neutered to me. So, you've heard me say that I want third evolutions, and you've heard me say that the Pokemon are ugly. But I need to preface it why it's important that they're ugly. Like, why is their ugliness such a huge feature of Pokemon Generation 7 Sun and Moon's design? Like, why is it such a big problem? Alright? And it's really the reason that they're ugly that's the issue. So every Pokemon game, for better or worse, has had some kind of design aesthetic. You can sum up in 1 and 2 words what each Pokemon game was going for in terms of its design. So the first Pokemon game was going for simple and natural designs. All the Pokemon designs were inspired by nature in some way. You got rock rhinoceroses, you got, you know, dragons, which we have a lot of good designs for, you got a lot of birds and rocks, and everything's natural. Everything comes from the real world. You could walk outside and find most of the Generation 1 Pokemon. Oh, look at that, I just found a caterpillar. Oh, look at that, I just found a frog. Oh, look at that, there's a fucking rock. Oh my god, it's a rock. I got me a Geodude. Time to go on a Pokemon adventure. It's a mouse? Electroshock mouse, do it! Kill all the squirrels with your electroshock powers. This is my fucking point. Walk right outside your house, find every Generation 1 Pokemon like 10 seconds. And that's the point. That was the whole point behind their designs. Generation 2, the idea was simple and charming. They went away a little bit from realistic Pokemon designs, but they wanted the Pokemon designs to keep that simple charm that the original Pokemon designs had. They also had a color palette now, so Pokemon had like 2 or 3 colors that usually complemented each other. Pokemon designs were simple and graceful, using the color combinations to make designs that didn't look like something you could find in your backyard, but still resembled something you wanted to find in your backyard. And that was the whole point. Pokemon started off cute looking, they ended up cool looking in the middle, and they ended up fierce looking at the end. But not so fierce that they were ugly. All the designs that were fierce had this gracefulness to them that made them look like real creatures that you wanted to collect and find in some way. Generation 2, in my opinion, aesthetically, was the most well-rounded. It understood that not all the designs need to be realistic, but that what was simple and charming about those designs was the most important parts. So that was Generation 2's design aesthetic. Generation 3 and 4, in my opinion, share a design aesthetic, though to a completely different effect between one game and the other. In Generation 3, there was now the Game Boy Advanced, which had 16 bits, which allowed for more complex designs. The color chip was better too, so they could have more contrasting and weird colors. They decided to make more complex, bold decisions. And that's really the 2 words that sum up Generations 3 and 4 are bold and complex. And see, the thing is bold and complex did not make pretty Pokemon designs. It made really ugly Pokemon designs. Generation 3 and 4 had ugly Pokemon designs, but at least those Pokemon designs had some unity to them, alright? Generation 3 got away with being bold and complex because the hardware still limited them enough that they really couldn't make designs that were really ugly. Just kinda ugly. Whereas Generation 4 had designs that were fucking hideous because they were on the DS and they could get away with it now. And that's the whole point, is that an aesthetic, a combined aesthetic for an entire generation can make or break a generation. It really adds to the feel. You could show me any Pokemon from the previous generations and I could tell you what design aesthetic from which game it was going for. Because all of the games have a united aesthetic. Generation 5 made a hybrid aesthetic, somewhere between Generation 3 and Generation 1. It was going for naturally complex. It had complexity in colors and boldness in the design like Generation 3 had, but it was going for the natural appeal that Generation 1 had. In Generation 5, all the animals, all the Pokemon could be found in nature, okay? They could all be found in nature, but their designs were more complex than Pokemon generations past. It was a good hybridization of styles that we really hadn't seen before, meaning that Generation 5 had its own unique aesthetic. Generation 6 went back to Generation 2's aesthetic. Generation 6's Pokemon look like they come from Generation 2, and I think that the game is all the better for it. So that leads us to Sun and Moon. What is Sun and Moon's design aesthetic? How do the Pokemon look? If I could sum it up in 2 words, it'd be a fucking mess, because they don't have a design aesthetic. All the Pokemon come from every fucking generation. There's a little bit of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and without a united aesthetic, Pokemon don't feel like they're from the same region. And I'm not talking about the Alolan forms, I'm saying the Pokemon from Alola do not feel like they come from Alola. They don't come from the same region, aesthetically. And that's a huge problem. There's a lot of easy fixes for this. They could have had a simple Pokemon design, you know, they could have come up with an aesthetic that was unique to Alola. They could have picked one of the previous different aesthetics. Generation 6 used Generation 2's aesthetic. They could have used Generation 1 or 5 or 3 or 4's aesthetic, but they chose to have some sort of weird fuck-up mash. All of them seem like they're from a different region. They couldn't pick a design aesthetic to go for, meaning that Alolan Pokemon look ugly and contrasting to one another, which is a huge problem because it means that you don't even have a region that feels like a region. I understand that's a little bit more difficult to make a united aesthetic now. After all, in the past, hardware limited this and influenced it. Pokemon in 8-bit and in black and white had to be simple and based off of nature, otherwise you wouldn't know what the fuck it was. You know, Pokemon Generation 2 had to use color in some way because it was the fucking Game Boy Color. It would be weird if you didn't use color, right? Generation 3, they wanted to stretch their legs and see what they could do with their new computer chips. In Generation 4, it was more of the same. Generation 5 was the first Pokemon game where they actually thought, hey, now that we can make any Pokemon design that we want to, what kind of Pokemon designs do we want to make? Generation 6, they thought about this question too. What kind of Pokemon designs do we want want to make, guys, now that we have all of the benefits of full 3D and full color. Whereas in Generation Sun and Moon, it seems like we've gone backward. It seems like we've stopped thinking once again about what we should design. You know, this is something that the last two Pokemon games had in common. Black and White and X and Y both had thoughtful design, except for Kyurem, Black and White, am I right, guys? Whereas Generation 3 and 4 didn't think about their designs because they could do pretty much whatever they wanted to. Is that what we're going back to? Do we really want Pokemon designs that look like Generation 4? Because Generation 4 looked like fucking ass. It's just frustrating for me for Pokemon to be fucking ugly again. There was such a long time there was a good stretch with Pokemon Black and White 2, and with X and Y, where the Pokemon weren't ugly anymore, and I thought we'd finally solved this issue. It's just strange to me, and they're ugly again, and it's annoying. This leads to my third and final point. Game design for dummies! Okay, so Pokemon Sun and Moon think that we're fucking retarded. Babies are, I don't really know. Because here's the thing, we have an endless fucking tutorial. I swear to God, tutorials used to be optional in Pokemon games. I've talked a lot about the aesthetic of Pokemon games in the past, but now I'm going to talk about what made Pokemon games fun. Because even if you have really ugly fucking games, the ugliest game in the world can be the funnest game in the world if you have good game design to back it up, okay? Games are toys, essentially. It's about how much fun you can have with the game. It's about the experience of the game. Hell, the Rubik's Cube is a fun game, and there's not much to it, alright? So, talking about the game design here is going to be kind of fucking important. So, what's Sun and Moon's big innovation? Taking away all of your fucking freedom. In the past, Pokemon was designed around a Metroidvania kind of feel, where Pokemon, you'd run around, do whatever the fuck you wanted to, eventually you'd run into a roadblock, and you'd need a thing to get past that roadblock, which required you to do a certain thing. But it always felt like you were in control of your character. You weren't being told which way to go, or what you had to do. You just encountered obstacles naturally, and naturally encountered the solution to those very same obstacles. This gave you a sense of, figured it out. Oh, there's a bush. I need to cut down the bush, it tells me. Guess there's a move or a Pokemon somewhere that lets me cut down a bush. Let me go find what that is. And then you do, and then you get past the thing. But now, fucking Rotom Dex or whatever comes on and is like, hey, did you know that you need to cut down a bush here? Did you know that the old man that you met 3 paces ago has cut? You should go talk to him. Now, I'm not saying that's a thing that actually happens in Sun and Moon. There's no HMs anymore. There's these things called Pokemon rides that are actually a pretty good innovation in the game. But what I mean is that the flow of Sun and Moon is destroyed because now there's instant tutorializing. Everything is a fucking tutorial. Everything is told to you straight out. You're not allowed to be confused. You're not allowed to figure things out. You're not allowed to do a goddamn puzzle, okay? Those things are gone now. With gyms being taken out, puzzles are basically gone. There may be a few in some of the trial challenges or whatever, but honestly, the puzzle of figuring out where to go and what to do is completely fucking absent from this game. So concerned are they with what you might do with your freedom. You're not able to catch a Pokemon on your own, really, for like an hour of this fucking game. I have watched people play this game who actually enjoy it on the internet, or at least they think they're enjoying it because, you know, the bright colors and the music and everything. They think they're enjoying the game. But I've seen them ask 20 times before getting their first Pokemon, hey, when am I getting my first Pokemon? When am I getting my first Pokemon? They're asked this constantly because they're made to wait for almost an hour before they get to do anything. You know, the first couple of towns, you just play and do exactly what you're supposed to do in the exact order that you're supposed to do it. This is horrible. This is fucking stupid. Because in reality, there's no reason why we can't run around and figure things out ourselves. You know, Totem Pokemon, Island Challenge, that's all cool. But it's only cool if we're allowed to actually have the adventure. We're never allowed to just explore and do what we want to. We always have to complete somebody else's fucking task. Something that somebody else wants us to do. You can argue that the original Pokemon was a string of events that were put together in a very specific order that you couldn't break. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like a natural progression, a natural adventure. The game kind of tricked you into thinking that you had freedom. Now, there's no illusion. You are fucking this game's bitch. You're its slave. You're not allowed to do what you want to do. And that sucks. And the honest reason for this is because they think you're too dumb to play the game. They think that the mystery of not knowing what's going to happen next is too frustrating for you. So they take that out of the game. They take the fun out of the game so that you won't risk being lost in a cave. That'll never happen to you in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Don't worry, they've removed all the challenge for you because you're a baby. That's what they think. So those are the first two problems with the game design. But then there's the lack of difficulty modes for experienced players. Okay, this is a simple fucking fix. You know the 3-hour tutorial at the beginning of Sun and Moon? Just remove it. Honestly, instead of having the road up decks tell you where to go, just let experienced players opt into a mode that lets them figure out things for themselves. Instead of giving somebody Poke Share right away, make sure that the Pokemon experience share happens later on in the game. That you still find it, but you signed it when you're 75% through the game, when you're like on Mount Silver or whatever, or you know, the equivalent. You find it near the end game so that you can level up Pokemon for competitive or whatever. But during the base game, experienced players can play the game without experience share. There's this theory in game design that people will always go through the most convenient solution for any problem, even if the most convenient solution takes fun out of the game. And this is true. Experience share is an element that makes the game less fun for experienced players, but they will use it because it's the most efficient option, if it's available to them. Which means that the only way to really make this aspect of the game fun for experienced players is to move experience share farther along in the game. You know, it would be the easiest thing in the world to take wherever you find experience share in Sun and Moon at the beginning and move that place or that Pokeball that contains it to the end of the game. You know, it'd be the easiest thing in the world, but it would also change the difficulty in this game quite a bit. They could add puzzles or make these gym battles harder or whatever, or I should say the island challenge battles or whatever, harder for an experienced player. Honestly, not having a difficulty mode when this game is marketed to 25-year-olds who've been playing Pokemon their entire lives is really strange to me. The first marketing for this game showed you all of the Pokemon games before this and made a big deal of how 20-year-olds are still playing Pokemon. Okay, if that's true, if you care Pokemon about the 20-year-olds that are playing, add a fucking difficulty mode so that we can enjoy the game, alright? Explanations endlessly. Every mechanic is explained to you without any mystery or without any ability to figure it out on your own. You're never allowed to figure out what something does. Oh, what does a Pokeball do? I don't know. All my Pokemon so far that I've gotten, my starters, come in a Pokeball. And I know that the item Pokeball says in its description that I'm supposed to throw it at Pokemon to catch Pokemon. So maybe, I don't know, I could go to the item section in the battle menu and like, I don't know, use a Pokeball. Maybe doing that lets me catch Pokemon. I don't know, fuck. See, the thing about Pokemon is that tutorials were always optional because the game was created in such a way that you could figure out shit on your own. But that's gone now. Also, there's no fucking adventure anymore. There's no adventure. Without freedom, without ambiguity, there is no adventure. You cannot have an adventure without mystery. You cannot have an adventure without getting lost. I mean, which one sounds more like an adventure? I got lost in the woods, and I didn't know how to get out. There were these huge trees in my way, and I didn't know how to take them down. But then, as I've wandered throughout the wood, I found a hurt old man who was surrounded by Team Rocket. I managed to defeat them, and the old man was thankful. He gave me the ability Cut, which allowed me to cut through those big trees from before. I went back to where the obstacle lay and cut them down, and all of a sudden I was able to solve the problem. Or, I was in the woods and there were signs directing me exactly where to go, and when I got to the place I fought a guy who instantaneously gave me the move Cut so that I could get through the trees. One of those is an adventure and one of those is not an adventure, and that's my fucking point. It's pretty wholly is the problem with the game design. Not only are there no surprises in the game, but you can't even get fucking lost. In my opinion, getting lost was a core concept in the Pokemon series. Grinding was a core concept in the Pokemon series. Having to use a team member in order to get them to be more powerful was important. It's the reason why older fans of the series don't like that feature. They can't put their finger on why they don't like experience share, but the reason is because they don't have to use the Pokemon that they want to make more powerful to make them more powerful. That's a pretty big issue, actually, especially when you're supposed to be having this team that you're supposed to love on in order to get them to become more strong. Okay, so there's a story aspect which is coupled with the rest of this. Pokemon World is too friendly. Okay, I'm not talking about the rival's not an asshole anymore. I mean, that's part of it, but that's not the only issue. In the past, in generations 1 through 3, it was very clear that the Pokemon were monsters that were dangerous, who would attract children. They would attack children for just going into the tall grass without a Pokemon. You had to have a Pokemon, you had to be a trainer, not because you wanted Pokemon to be your friends, but in order to travel through the world, you had to have Pokemon to keep you safe from the monsters who wish to attack you. The Pokemon Society relies on Pokemon because without Pokemon, people would die. In Generation 5, they brought up the question of whether or not people could survive without Pokemon, and what the Pokemon's true nature was. And the end result is that the trainer is a necessary evil. Without Pokemon trainers, the Pokemon world would die. And that's important. Now, they make it sound like it's an optional thing. Like, oh, you could just run through the world with repels and not be in any danger, I guess. And, oh, by the way, did you know that Pokemon are actually your friends and not your slaves? Here's the thing. It's always been explained in Pokemon that the gym badges and the Pokeballs and the Pokemon's natural instincts are all used to trick the Pokemon into following you. You may feel like Pokemon are your friends, but they are your Pokemon. You own them. They are, for all intents and purposes, your slaves. And Pokemon has never been shy about discussing this before now. But now, no. See, Pokemon are actually your friends. Okay, I'm gonna be honest here. While I don't have a problem with the concept of Pokemon being your friends, you're their owner first. That's the reason why own, like the owner number, always had the word own right next to it. It was very clear that you owned your Pokemon. How do you trade your friends? Have you ever ran into a random person and say, hey, I have this friend. I don't really like him all that much. I want to trade him for your friend. Doesn't fucking happen. But you do that with property. Hey, I have this thing I like. Do you have a thing you like? I want that thing that you like. Let me trade. That happens. See, Pokemon not being property causes plot holes in the game. For instance, Pokemon aren't property, then how come they can't just run away if they don't want to actually work with you? I mean, I know that the Pokemon franchise wants to go for this sunshiny, Disney-esque, saccharine bullshit and wants to seem like it's not all dark and shit, but the reality is the reason you're not allowed to go into tall grass in any of the Pokemon games is because monsters would tear you to shred and kill you. Pokemon still have violent Pokedex entries, but we're supposed to believe that all Pokemon are friends, and that we're not enslaving them for our survival. Generation 5 is 100% honest about the nature of the Pokemon-human relationship. They say out and outright, hey, it might not be moral to keep these Pokemon enslaved, but it's the only way that the human race survives. And this game wants to completely fucking ignore that. You know, it wants to completely ignore that, which pisses me off. Also, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it. The rival not being an asshole is getting annoying too. Come on, I want somebody to really challenge me. I want somebody who I want to punch in the fucking face. Come on, give me a rival who I actually dislike a little bit, or who at least has opposite ideologies to me. Just anybody. Give me two rivals. Give me a nice rival, give me an asshole rival. You know, Pokemon Ethereal Gates understands this. Speaking of which, I would rather play Pokemon fan games. I'd rather play a Pokemon fan game than play this game. Because in a Pokemon fan game, I have mystery. I don't know what the fucking Pokemon are going to evolve into, and I have a douchebag rival who challenges me, and the game is a little bit harder. I'm just saying that Pokemon has fucked up so bad at this point that even Pokemon Ethereal Gates, a fan game, is a superior Pokemon generation to Generation 7. And that's the real issue. Those are all the problems I have with Generation 7. How to fix it? Let's see, a difficulty slider for experienced players. More Pokemon designs that work with the theme of the island. And I haven't even touched on, by the way, that this generation is derivative of Hoenn. Honestly, if you just add 3D verticality to the Hoenn region, that's the region you've got this time. Both regions are tropical, and both regions look exactly the same. That's right, even the supposedly beautiful Alolan region that we're supposed to buy is just a copy of Hoenn. Anyway, how to fix it? More unique region, an actual aesthetic for the Pokemon that is united and feels consistent. More Alolan forms instead of more new Pokemon. And like I said, the difficulty slider, which I feel is the most important part of this. Also, the campaign could have had more mystery in it, you know, with less bullshit about revealing all of the Pokemon and all of the things that happen in the game. Things like Red and Blue, the Ultra Beasts, that kind of shit, Kukui being the champion, could have all been kept secret from us, the player, which could have allowed for more enjoyment. But, yeah, that's how I feel about this. That's my takeaway on Pokemon Sun and Moon. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. This is Dr. Making Stuff signing out.